So hello everyone, my name's Fiona Wallace and I'm Head of Pre-sessional at UCL Centre for Languages and International Education. I'm going to talk over about roughly 10 minutes on our experience of adapting the CLIE Pre-sessional, which was a completely face-to-face course up to that point for online delivery in response to COVID-19. Before I start, I'd also like to acknowledge the enormous amount of support that I felt at the time from the BALEAP community, just to know that others were facing exactly the same challenges as we were, and the open discussion of these challenges on forums was incredibly important, and I'd like to formally acknowledge that and say thank you. So if you've been through this process, you will know that moving online means reimagining absolutely everything. I can't discuss everything here, so we'll focus on the student induction and the course structure. I'm happy to take questions about these elements at the end of my talk, or indeed any other aspect of our transition online. So it was necessary to reimagine our student induction. Introducing a week zero is an idea that I got from Bristol University Pre-sessional, who referenced Gilly Salmon and the 5-stage model. And this proved very successful both operationally and pedagogically. It takes time for students to access platforms and they need to be conversant in them before they can learn effectively. Pre-COVID-19, we had a series of talks during induction from internal stakeholders from UCL, such as UCL Library and International Student Support, and talks on the academic programme and assessments led by myself and the pre-sessional senior team, which students seem to invariably use to get over their jet lag and then descend upon us afterwards with questions. So we reimagined the induction for the online format, putting all this information into short videos. So here's a timetable for the 8-week, which is typical of the induction timetables we used. You can see that we ask students to work through these materials earlier in the week, post questions and attend training in platforms and Q&A sessions by way of follow-up. Those of us leading the Q&A sessions really enjoyed the level of student engagement, which was very different to the large lecture theatres of exhausted-looking students that I've just mentioned. Students fed back that they could ask the questions that they needed to ask, and the fact that they weren't in a large lecture theatre and could ask those focused questions either verbally or in the chat and get an immediate response was really valuable to them. So we received very positive feedback on this format. As can be seen here, students felt they understood the course and were comfortable with platforms. It isn't that the feedback wasn't great with the face-to-face induction, but the engagement was there. And we didn't have the experience we used to have of teachers asking why wasn't X and Y covered in the student orientation, when not only was it covered, but it was up there on the VLE. So for this reason, I would seriously consider and would like to stay with this online format when such a time comes that we can return to face-to-face teaching, because of the higher level of student engagement with this format. Platforms aside, we do have room for improvements with respect to making students feel part of an online community in the first week. And we are currently looking at different activities that we can use to achieve this. So the second thing I'd like to talk about is the course structure. And I'm sure that the challenges listed here are familiar to many of you and certainly anyone involved in leading a programme last summer. One of the main challenges was to reimagine the course structure to deliver materials which were designed for face-to-face delivery online. So I'm going to outline what we did. This slide shows how we organised students into classes of up to 16 max, but they were taught in seminar groups of 8 students. Each seminar group of 8 students was further divided into into 2 groups of 4, which formed student study groups. So students met with their study group every day to work synchronously on set tasks, which were then developed the following day in a related seminar using a flipped learning approach. Here's a typical timetable showing the overarching course structure and the 3 modes of study. You can see if you look across the top row that students were expected to engage in a reasonable amount of independent self-study every day. If you look at the second row, you can see that students were engaged in 2 hours of synchronous study with their study group of up to 4 students, as I mentioned. So what they worked on here in this time, so for example in research skills, study group fed into a seminar session the following day in BST in the same subject. The reason for this scheduling was that most of our students were based in China and teachers needed a time lapse in order to respond to completed tasks, discussion board posts, etc. before planning or integrating that into their seminar. I devised variations of this timetable for students based in different time zones, for example, South America, with the same overarching principles. Seminars were 2 hours long from Tuesday to Thursday, and there was an hour-long session with the whole class on Monday, and then students were engaged in webinars on Fridays. So how did students know what they were supposed to be doing in their study groups? So as well as the course overviews that you'd usually expect, indicating what's happening across the course in any given skill, we produced a document called a weekly planner. The senior pre-sessional team wrote most of these as we felt that teachers had enough to contend with. And these were, hopefully you can see here that students were clear about what they were expected to do asynchronously and what we wanted them to do synchronously in their study groups every week. Teachers posted these online every Friday for their class so that their study groups could organise themselves, and of course they had the flexibility to adapt these to the specific needs of their group. So here's the Opiniono feedback showing what students thought about the course structure. You can see that it's overwhelmingly positive. The majority thought that they did develop the key academic skills working with this course structure. So I'm not sure how well you can see, but the green is strongly agree and the kind of orange is mostly agree. So for example, I was able to work effectively during my individual study sessions, and then just one on seminars. The seminars with my teacher gave me the opportunity to clarify what I didn't understand in an independent study and study group. And here's some more qualitative quotes or from the Opiniono feedback, which were fairly typical. So overall, students really liked the opportunity to develop learner autonomy, and I'm really pleased with this outcome, as developing learner autonomy, I think, is something we have struggled with in the past on pre-sessional. Interestingly, some teachers felt that these groups should be monitored more, as they didn't know what was going on in these groups. And I think this kind of really touches on what Olwyn and James have just discussed about kind of the experience for teachers of this online context. So here's some feedback about the seminars, and again you can see, despite the overwhelming positivity, there are some issues. You can see that engagement is one of those issues, and it also again points to the fact that we need to better support teachers in terms of the online context and teaching online. So here's how we're trying to address those issues with respect to engagement and what happens in seminar sessions. We're developing materials to train students to better engage in seminars and to better understand what's expected of them in study groups and in seminars. We now have the opportunity to develop materials for the online environment rather than trying to shoehorn face-to-face materials into this structure. And in the student materials and teachers' notes, we aim to make more explicit the relationship between the different modes of study and to include tasks to better support teachers in exploiting the online environment. Last summer, we discussed these ideas and had suggestions on the scheme of work, but next summer, we really want to kind of put specific tasks and ideas in the materials and teachers' notes. We'd also like to allow for more fluidity in our structure so that there's scope for kind of input where that's appropriate and follow-up and consolidation. So I've outlined a few of the changes that we made in response to COVID-19, and please feel free to ask about anything I've discussed or any other aspect of our transition online. Thank you very much for listening.